just having this really honest conversation about classic us, about even just where we are at the moment, like the fact that we're soft launching the summer holidays and we're women who work for themselves and we're mums, and we have made this discussion, this commitment to just kind of keep going and keep trying to do this thing, whatever it is. And that, you know, I've had to set up outside and tell my children in the calmest possible terms, like, don't interrupt me for like just an hour. And then Shippy was like, but what if I'm hungry? And what if I need this? And I'm like, well, don't need that for an hour. Like she's about to be 9 years old. Like, I have fed her. She's been fed. So I guess it's more about, like, as women who have a creative outlet or who want to be involved in any kind of creativity, but maybe it's just being a woman wanting to do anything. I don't know. Like, I actually don't know. But definitely anything creative, I find, it's so much harder when you've got kids because, like we were saying the other day, you can't just be inspired and just get into the flow. I think, you know, that flow that you want to get into, whether it's painting or singing or just making things, whatever, updating our websites if that gives us pleasure. We have to find these pockets of time to do them, and then there's no flow. Like, and then we'll start doing it, and then that'll be disrupted, and then you kind of lose our train of thought, and then we have to start again, and it's just really fucking frustrating. That's all. So I don't know if it's a positive topic.
I think it's a really real topic. I don't know anyone who wouldn't see themselves in whatever creative space they're in on their motherhood journey, and I think it's nice to acknowledge that it is really hard because so many show up in the world all put together, and as if it's oh yeah, you know, everything is fine, but we all have layers and layers of all of this, all of the above. And what came to mind when you was talking about that is that creativity is a channel for me. Yet that it's a very flowy state when we're creative, whether that is a website, whether that's painting, any of the above. And I think why it's hard is that we have so many layers again of, you know, are the kids fed? Why is the kitchen a mess again? Have I put on the laundry? Did I pack that thing I needed to pack for her for that event? So that's taking away as this layer of noise in the mind. And that to me is a blockage for that very easy flowing channel of creativity. So like we talked about recently, we need to just have a place to set this up, sit down, have everything ready so that it's somewhat effortless for us to get into our flow. And I think that's what mums need. They need to know what it is that they need to do for themselves and that creative, whether that's a professional or whether it's just private. But there has to be, I think, or it would help if we had a little nook in the house or where we live where our things are ready for that, to open that creative funnel, where we can for a moment press pause on everything else. If we have to set it up every time or create something new from scratch, it won't happen, in my experience.
It's true. 100%. It's such a block. And I think what you were saying as well is that mental blockage. So like, even if you have the space set up, right, and you have this room or a room of one's own, as was suggested, that's one thing, right? So say everything's set up and ready to go and you've got your artwork or your whatever it is, your creative pursuit, anything that requires my dog's afraid of everything. Oh, it's a child coming. You know what? We're just going to go, but hey, Shippy, is this urgent? Because I'm actually filming right now, sweetie. Can you? Yes, I'm hot. Can I go to the pool? No, because I can't watch. Well, I can watch you from here, but I can't really do much to help you.
If you drown.
No, I mean, I will jump in and save her. But the rule is if I have to jump in, we finish swimming for the day. So this is actually recording. Do you want to be on the internet?
Shippy!
Oh, you don't want me to see? Okay. Hey,
is Mom not allowed to be on there?
I'm like,
come with me to the park.
Oh, I love you. I will when I'm finished, okay? Yeah.
And just like that, the creative funnel has been blocked.
Village parenting. Thank you. It's hard to be creative when you're a mom.
Yet here we are.
And I'm like, I'm trying to pretend that I'm super chill about it all. But internally, I'm hearing the dog bark. And now I know that I'm living on borrowed time. So do we have anything else to talk about?
Well, the creative funnel is dead.
Oh, I went out this morning to drop one of my kids to school, who then discovered it was a mufti day, so and wasn't wearing mufti, so it was just too many things. And then we decided that she just wouldn't go to school, which was whatever. We're not doing anything at school anyway.
No.
And I hadn't had a coffee, and we didn't have any almond milk. And I went to there's like, I live in a small little tiny town. There's just like a little petrol station that has like groceries, like last minute things. So I went there for some almond milk, and they're doing this like massive reconstruction, and there's like a lot of different men around doing things that men do together.
Yeah.
And the woman behind the counter looked like she was having a day. And she was really quite sweet. She's like, I was like, how are you? She's like, well, hanging in there. And she's like, how are you? And I was like, well, we're soft launching the summer holidays with 5 kids. And she went, oh, you win. And I just feel like,
yeah,
that was the beginning. But how intensely like confronting and unexpected this part of mothering was when I had a baby. Like, I thought I should say that I was going to have a baby, and I definitely had this idea. Of course, my life is going to change and things are going to be different, and I'm going to be tired, right? That felt, but not this level of like cellular focus on something else 24/7. And that makes me think about what you were saying, that mental space. This is what I was actually trying to talk about before. You can have the room, you can have the space set up, but mentally, I find that like my kids are just constantly 24/7 occupying a part of my brain.
yes.
So there's just this like tab in the background that's constantly running, and that is so hard to shut off. I don't know if I can. There are times, I guess, where I can, where I get really deeply in flow. And it feels amazing when you're there, but it is really difficult to do, even if you have the space. So I guess at the very least you have the space, right? That would be like the bottom rung of needs.
Yeah.
Hopefully I have to definitely let go of things being lovely around me, like we're saying, like the dishes done and the washing and all the housework things, because I could have a clean house or I could do something that I enjoy with my life. Try to do a little bit of both. But then even if you do all those things, you're always a mother. You're always mothering, and you're always aware of all of your children and where they are. And that never switches off. Like, even my older girls are not here. They're staying on the other side of town the last couple of days. But I'm constantly thinking about what they're needing, and that is really hard. That's hard. And that was very, very confronting certainly in the first year of becoming a mother. I never realized, I don't know if you can. I don't know. I don't want to be like, I don't want to assume other people can't conceptualize something because I didn't. But it was the intensity of that constant focus on something outside of your body that you can't control.
Yeah.
It threw me for a loop, and it didn't stop. It never stopped. I mean, it certainly got easier as they got bigger, and there was, they were less suicidal, like when they're toddlers and they're just like, oh, how can I
let me go to the edge of that cliff and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a lot more intense. And then as they get bigger and they're more capable, and you think, oh, they'll probably keep themselves alive without me watching them 24/7. But yeah, that's...
It's a little bit like explaining birth to a first-time woman. We have all these words and we can give concepts and analogies, etc., but you don't actually... And everyone will have an individual, expression or experience of all the things. But that experience of that tap, and in your case, there are 5 taps open, let's be real, and in mine, there are 4, at all times. And it isn't the same as a work tap or a like, how's my best friend doing, or how's my mom. It's a different kind of tap because we're 100% responsible for so many years. And so that's why it's open. And I think it's really hard to articulate to others. I do think everyone has different coping mechanisms, of course. And when you're talking, because I 100% feel the same way, and the shock of, because you sit there with this sweet little newborn baby and you're learning to breastfeed, that's where you begin, right? And you're like, oh wow, look, I created this thing and it's amazing. And then it evolves. Then, you know, whether you put your child in daycare or that growth is where you realize, like, you know, the suicidal element, or like, you know, where you're like, oh wow, I have, you know, this is getting more expansive in terms of my duties and my responsibilities. I think that what comes to mind as well is that we have to be really careful how we manage those taps in the brain, because it can be really depleting. And when we don't access this creative space as a woman, as a mother, I think that's like, you know, like a nutrient deficiency. There is a deficiency in you as a whole mother if you cannot access that creative space on a somewhat regular basis. Forget about perfection and forget about regularity. If there is just some sort of ebb and flow where you can find that level of balance, and if you can't, I actually think that it compromises you in so many areas of your life. So I think what has been interesting for me, at least on my journey, and it continues to evolve, is how do I keep those tabs in check so that I don't spiral? Because it's too much if I actually have to do all those things and, like you said, have a tidy and clean home, as well as I don't actually think it's possible. And maybe if you don't work, like maybe if you're a householder, you use your if you don't work, then maybe, I don't know. But so I think for me, it's been this journey of finding ways to manage the brain waves, like where am I expending my energy and how am I regulating my nervous system, which is something I talk a lot about, because to me that has been the key to not losing my shit. Because it's really easy to do that, and that will happen anyways. But I do feel like I see it as my responsibility to, yes, those tabs have to be open because we're mothers and it's our responsibility for so many years, but it can't run amok. And there has to be room for us. Like, that is my deep, deep passion, is that there has to also be room for the woman I was, or the woman I am. And that to me is an ongoing push and pull experience of how do I make more room for her, for myself. And it changes as the ages of our children grows. Haven't you experienced that too? Because it looks different when you have, you know, kids under 5, and then you might have some preteens, and etc. So that the energy exchange changes. And when they're little, it's very physical, you know, like stopping them from running across the road and things like that. And then when they're older, I'm finding, you know, that preteen and teen realm is very emotional and mental. You know, they're so much more self-sufficient in other ways, but their emotional needs, their connection to us is different. And that, maybe because I'm adjusting to it, it's relatively new for me. I'm noticing, whoa, there's a whole new level of managing that energy exchange and that new level of support that they need that's so different. I don't need to pack their bags anymore, but I do need to manage their minds and their social, you know, challenges that they're experiencing. So it continues to evolve, is what I'm trying to say. And I feel like I constantly have to check in and go, how am I managing this? Because it is my responsibility to show up. And it's also my responsibility to show up for myself and make sure that that creative funnel isn't lost in the equation. And then I revisit it in 10 years. You know, I'm not willing to do that.
Well, no, because that's just not a life, is it? It doesn't feel like a life if you're not in it, if you're not actually with your sense of who you are in these amazing, important parts of our life. It's like this it's like quite a dichotomy, you know. It's like for years I'd stop and like have these tableaus of my family where I'd just like watch them existing around me, you know, those moments where you're like, this is it, this is the prime, like this is these amazing prime moments, like kids playing together, you're chilling in the lounge and someone's out in the garden, and it's just this moment where you kind of see everyone and the veil kind of lifts and you're like, this is it, this is the dream that I dreamed, right? This is the family that I'm raising. And I know that when I'm older I'll look back on these moments and be like, remember when they were little and we did these things? So I don't want to be experiencing those moments and not be in them and not be fully present, and being fully present means being myself. So I don't want to be, and I definitely, the ebb and flow is so real. There's definitely been seasons of my life where I've just been like surviving, you know. I mean, like yourself, I mean, at one point I had 5 kids under 10, and it was, I look back on that now and I'm like, yeah, that was hard. But at the time, I probably was in a little bit of survival mode, and I maybe would have done well. I definitely would have done well having good friends or community or support to really push me to take space for myself, because I would have had an easier time at it. The work, and maybe there was a shift in me that actually happened where it got to critical mass and I actually no longer could do all the things. You know, there was that earlier time where I guess I could keep doing all the things. I could make sure the house was somewhat under control, or at least in motion, like constantly being cleaned and organized. The kids could be, you know, helped. I was studying and I was working. Like I could be doing all of these things and keeping all these plates spinning. And then it got to a point where that was actually impossible. There was no possible way for one person to do all of these things. And we didn't have like family support around us. It was just my husband and myself. And that's also a really important lesson, is that it's actually not possible. Like you can't actually do all the things all the time. And then learning how to stop and make space for yourself, because that chaos is it's going to be there for you anyway, right? So it was actually kind of liberating in some ways, because it's almost like, well, whatever I do, it's going to be a bit messy, a bit scruffy. It's going to be quite imperfect. There's going to be a lot of, you know, I remember thinking that someone's going to be unhappy at all times. That was another thing.
So true.
No matter what I did, one person in my family was unhappy. And that, like, the codependent in me found that so challenging for so many years. Like, everyone has to be happy. And then it was like, oh, that can't happen either. And so there was this new doorway into like, well, if they're going to be unhappy, I might as well take an hour and go for a walk, or I might as well go get a massage, or stay out, you know, like do whatever it is that I needed to do to feel good. I painted a lot. I used to write a lot. Because they were things I could do around my kids, unlike, say, recording something where they can come in and actually like make you feel that someone's watching you fail as a mother, right? Because that's how it feels when you're not perfectly presenting. Yeah. The ebb and the flow is so massive. I'm grateful that I got to a point of critical mass where I actually had to drop all the things. Because I wonder if I would have still been trying to be the best. They're like, you know, and you're like, oh, well, that's not going to happen, so I can just be me. And when you were talking about how your kids are getting older and that kind of preteen, teen, the emotional needs, what I find, I guess, a different challenge compared to when they're babies or little, is that even though it was incredibly physically demanding when they were younger, there was a certain amount of control that we had about when that would happen. I can hand the baby off at this time of night, you know, assuming there's someone to take the baby, or like I can be like, I'm going to do this activity at this time. Whereas, you know, when your kids are older, you're getting into bed and they're like, Mom, I've had a bad day. Can I talk to you about this big, huge emotional thing? So then you need
at
to
11
show
p.m.
up.
always.
100%. Yeah, between 8 and 10, you know, which is right when you think your day is done. And then you have to dig down deep and find the emotional fortitude to be actually present, because I want my kids to come to me for these things. This is actually what I want to be there for. It's just like they don't schedule it at 10 a.m., you know?
Yeah.
Which is when I'm more switched on.
Yeah. So have you done anything to accommodate that change? Because for so many years, there is a rough bedtime, let's just say 7:30 or 8 p.m. or whatever, something like that, where there is a shutdown, and there is usually a few hours in the evening where there is peace for a little bit. And you're right, that changes. So have you had to adjust your, you know, have your ability to kind of be available? Because surely you're not like an endless tap of lovely motherhood support.
Oh, I'm very much not. I think it was hardest when I had a couple of kids who were still really little, like young children, like 4, 5, a little bit younger, where they were very physically demanding, and bedtime needed to be quiet for them to be able to go to sleep. And had a couple of like tween teenagers who would just be, you know, like their body clock is made for like being up at night. So they would just want to start getting into it. So there was this time where it would be like 6 hours of the evening were just tending to children, because their time zones were all very different. I don't know if there's anything I did that was particularly helpful, but now I go, oh, okay, yeah, that is actually different. And maybe only in discussing it do I realize how much it's changed. And the thing is, I guess I spoke to my kids about it too. Like I do use language like I'm a person as well, and I actually need to sleep, and I really love you. And sometimes I'm able to hold the space for it, and actually sometimes I'm not. Like you and I both work on call. The hardest times have been when, you know, there's someone in early labor, you know that you're going to be going out that night to work, and like you need to be somewhat coherent. And you're like, great, I'm just going to get to bed at like 8 o'clock, at least try and catch a couple of hours sleep. And it's almost like clockwork. That's when someone needs me the most.
Yes, because you're slipping away from in that energetic space.
Yeah.
They can feel you slipping away.
Yes,
What's
they
with the
really.
dogs today? Sorry.
It's all right. They're probably talking to each other. So that was like, I mean, I handled it well sometimes, and I handled it poorly sometimes. You know, sometimes I was just like, listen, you need to leave me alone. I'm actually exhausted. I'm really tired, and I could be going to work for another 12 or more hours. Who knows? Like, you don't know when these things are going to end, right? And that was, again, just a boundary. And it was self-preservation kind of forced me into that. But I guess what came from it was an understanding that I am there for them a lot of the time. I guess that's what happened, is I put boundaries in where I would actually have to say no, which is really hard to do, because, and I wouldn't do it all the time. And when I would sometimes say, I can't actually be for you right now, I guess I felt like it was just taking money from the bank. And I just consciously tried to invest emotionally in them when I could, so that if I had to withdraw a bit at other times, I knew that they were going to be topped up. Does that make sense? So like, I'd make coffee dates with them. I went through stages where I tried to be like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour with every child once a week on a coffee date. I have 5 kids, right? So, and then my husband would also like to see me occasionally and have a private conversation. So it's almost like, oh, I've got this extra job for what will end up being 2 hours a day, every day. And I don't have time to fit that in, which sounds really shitty, but I had to learn other ways to do that, because I see a lot of those sort of parenting ideas like, oh, make sure your kid has an hour alone with you every day. And I'm like, okay, that's 5 hours of my day. Like, what do I do? When do I sleep? When do I work? What about you?
Yeah.
Because your kids are a little younger than mine, and you're in it, I think, a lot more.
Yeah, I was thinking that yesterday, actually, that maybe sometimes I live through you, because I'm like, oh, my kids are big. And I'm like, no, that's Jen's kids. Mine are still small. I had this feeling yesterday when I came home. I was like, wow, they're really little kids still. So yes, I'm still there. I think I am very verbal with my kids. I really believe that from a very early on, you can explain them a lot of things. So that has been my approach to parenting in many aspects. And so I've really explained them when I can calmly and, from a really, solid place, explain to them that I have limitations and my work is very important to me. It's not about making money. It's not that something I just have to do. It's something I want to do. It's something I need to do. And in my case, in our case, I think it's easy to, well, it's been easy for my kids to really understand that it's a passion that, mama has to go to see the babies being born. To them, it's a really easy thing to understand and connect to, which helps me a lot. And they really have, every single one of them immediately understand that when I have, getting the phone calls and the messages that there is some pre-labor and there's some stirrings and there's probably a baby, they get excited and they actually give me space. And I don't know what exactly I have done. It's actually so amazing. I don't know if it can be replicated. It might just be a luck. I got lucky. But maybe it also comes down to the way that I have explained and I suppose educated them in some ways about it. That I really need to be there for them, for these women and these babies coming, and then I'll be back. And I have always, like, similar to you, I've always made sure then that when I am back and we've had that rest, that then I make sure that I'm 100% present and not diving into something else that's my work or another thing that removes me from them. So they know that mama comes back and they have learned that there is a safety in that because they, like you said, have no idea when we come back. And when you think about it, if you're a little 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old and your mom is leaving in the middle of the night, it's not, I don't know if I could have done it as a child. I would have been very stressed out about that. So I think for me and for my kids, it has come down to being really articulate about it, helping them understand and be really empathetic or sympathetic to this is important too. And it's a collective importance. And that has actually been very important for me to, even if they do nothing about birth in their adult life or anything like that, but that it is a very, very precious thing. And it needs to be honored by everyone, whether you're a lawyer or a bus driver, doesn't matter. We need to honor that. And I have really planted those seeds well. That's really that. I think that is why it's doable then 100% because of my husband. That he's able to step in and be really an equal parent on that level, that they immediately can lean into him and know that everything is taken care of. They're not worried that dinner won't be served or anything like that. That wouldn't even cross their mind. I think on an emotional level, there is obviously a different interchange there. Somehow it's working.
When you were talking, it reminded me, there was a stage with few of my kids over the years actually, where they would get quite anxious about, and I mean, like you said, totally reasonable. They just wake up and mum wouldn't be there, right? And so I went through stages with them where I would actually wake them up in the night to say I'm leaving, and which sounds crazy to people, but it for them, they went through, and it was probably around that kind of between 5 and 10 years old, that kind of age, somewhere in there. It's all a bit of a blur. It's not a very narrow age range. I remember. But I remember it was so important for them to have a sense of control or at least order with my very disordered life. So, there's really clear expectations, and learning how to be comfortable upsetting them as well. I guess that sounds a bit silly, but waking them saying I'm going to work, and they're always ask me, when will you be back? Even my husband asks me. It's so funny. When are you coming back? And I'll go, I don't know. Maybe
when the baby has been born.
3 days. I don't know. We'll see. But I love that they still ask the question, because there's this. I don't know if they just think I'm really good and I can predict this shit now, but I definitely can't. But we letting them know that I'm going, and like you said, there is that repair. And I mean, now 4 out of 5 of them have phones, so they just text me, which is great, because I can at least, sometimes I can be like, okay, the baby's out, I'm on the home stretch. We know that I'm not coming home immediately, but they know that things are moving along. Something else you were talking about, which really struck me. Sorry. My flow is not flowy.
I had a thought too, but I've also lost my thought.
it's a
How are
lot.
we doing? How are we doing this?
Well, this is how we're doing it. I mean, and part of me really, I mean, we spoke about this week because we knew the summer holidays were coming up, and we knew that we were going to be mentally busier and disrupted, and our houses are going to be filmed messier. I mean, I've been looking online this morning for like a room divider to put behind me.
Yes, I thought
So
about that too, a curtain.
yes, I can just hide. I'm not sure. Should I show the mess or we'll see. Let's see what happens. It's the beginning
Yeah.
of summer. By the end, it'll be like us turning up in our pajamas being like, all right, there's nothing. But
Keeping it real.
yes, I really want, that is sort of a life goal of mine, is to constantly show up authentically and be real, because we both have this really distinct privilege of getting to know people in this intimate way. You know, when people say you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, like, I think we do. I think we have a pretty good idea about what goes on, and it's messy and it's
Yes.
real, and I understand the vulnerability of, because I feel it deeply, of stepping into a space and being really authentic. But I almost feel like it's our responsibility to do that. I feel like once we have this knowledge that everyone's sort of struggling with whatever, but no one knows anyone else is struggling, I almost feel like it's our responsibility to step into that space and say, hey, life is messy, and let me show you that it's okay to be messy and still be an okay person or a good enough person. This is what we were going to talk about, actually. Now I remember, because we had a meetup at the park last week, and Mum's Chat, which they do, and there was a conversation about the fakeness or the falseness of meeting up with a bunch of new mums and dads or whoever else wants to be there, but with new parents at the park with your new babies, right? Because you all have to leave your home, you have to be organized, you have to be dressed. You turn up with your baby, you have to be, you know, you have to have had already some reserves in the tank to be able to turn up, right? Because if you've had a really shit time, really shit night, you're exhausted, you feel like crap, chances are you're not going to that meetup, right? So the babies who turn up and the mums who turn up are the ones who have usually at least sort of base level coping. And then you have this somewhat contrived experience of being in a public space and talking, hopefully, but it's always disjointed because everyone's feeding and changing nappies and forgetting their thought halfway through the sentence. And then you go home again to be alone. And what I was talking about is when my babies were younger, the biggest savior for those early years was I had a beautiful community of women around me, friends, and we were all kind of doing it on our own without a lot of family support. And we would regularly just rock up to each other's homes at between sort of 3 to 6 p.m. and we'd feed the kids together, we'd bath them together, we'd just do that ratty evening stuff together in someone's home, so it was quite comfortable. We didn't have this need to show up in a certain way. And then if it was your home, the other person would leave, or, you know, you go back to your place, usually around the same time your partner might be getting home from work or whatever. And it was still hard, but at least you were being observed. Like someone was not like watched, but someone was seeing you in it. And it's so much easier when you're doing stuff like that together. And anyway, I was floating this idea to women, like, please keep meeting us once a month at the park. Anyone's welcome. It's great. But why don't you guys just do it at each other's homes? Like, you can just do that. And then the conversation was, well, I need to clean and I need the house to be organized. And then one of beautiful, glorious woman who I was recently her midwife, who I just adore, she confessed to me that she cleaned her house every time I came. I was like, if you could be in trouble, you'd be in trouble for that. No, come on, like, houses are messy. That's what they are. And I mean, yeah, it's just like that thing is really hard. Being vulnerable, and it's hard enough to be vulnerable with another woman going through it who gets it. But then it's like, if we could start being a little bit brave, showing up a little bit more realistic, being a little bit messier, then the other women who are desperate to be accepted for their mess can see that and go, oh, okay, I can probably pull that cover down a little bit and I can be a little bit more messy. And then this really cool snowball effect happens, and then you become like you and me, where it's like everything's on the table. Let's just be scruffy and honest, and we can be both a good mother and impatient with our children. We can be both, a creative woman and someone who's doing the dishes. We can be all the different parts of us, and be seen as that, and not have to explain these, seemingly opposite or opposing parts of ourselves, because because we're not one thing, right?
It's impossible. Oh, yes. When you say that, when she said that she was cleaning every time you came, it's almost like I get disappointed. I'm like, because I show up wildly authentic for the women and families I support, from like the meet and greet, which is, we may not ever work together, but I have to, because we need to work out if we can work together, first of all. So I am very raw, very authentic with everyone, and which is wildly freeing, by the way. But so when I know that my clients or even a friend that they clean before I get there, I see that as like, oh, we haven't reached that point yet. That's a shame. Where you can be vulnerable with me, you still have to have a level of facade up. And I acknowledge that it's probably not about me. It's probably something in them that is not ready to show their true self, etc. So that's really clear to me. But what is astounding is that it's like, I almost want to say all of us have or do this because we're so afraid of showing our true dark side or like our true mess. We're so afraid of it or are comfortable about it. And I think our friendship have really showed me that there is so much to gain and so much to win by not having to vacuum before you come over, or not having to show up perfectly. And I can have shit around everywhere and you still love me at the end of the visit, and maybe a little bit more because I showed up more authentically. And that has been a massive lesson for me in, well, I can do that everywhere because it's not my responsibility what you think of me. But the fact that I don't have to have these layers of showing up and being a certain person or version of myself every time someone comes to my house or I meet someone, that's exhausting. It's really exhausting to have different masks to put on. And I have certainly lived my life that way. So I'm really removing these masks, one by one. And there are very few left, I think, which is so freeing. And that means, going back to the creativity, it means that I can very quickly now go through the different layers to access my creative funnel, so to speak. Whereas before it was very hard because I had multiple layers on me already that I probably felt a bit ashamed about, and like it's very hard to be that perfect version of yourself because it's not authentic. So there's all kinds of feelings involved in that as well, and it makes it virtually impossible to access that creative, very authentic funnel where you access that space that I think you have to be like raw, naked in a way. So that, I agree with you. It's an absolute mission to get to a place where we can somehow give that gift to each other of, I don't mind when you're yourself. I really don't mind. And if maybe I actually prefer it because then you validate me in showing up more authentically too. I actually think it's up there with one of the most important things that we could give each other as gifts as women, because there are generations of this that have just been hammered into us on a deep unconscious level of being perfectly, glamorously delightful, ever-pleasing, codependent.
It's exhausting. And I think at some point you have to choose between the exhaustion of living that with those masks, the isolation as well of not connecting with people, either just being at home alone because going out is too hard and you can't have anyone come into your home, right? Horrific. Or having to somehow get your shit together even though you're beyond tired and your kid's ratty, just to get out of the house or to do a thing, whatever. That is just beyond exhausting. Or you're going to have to step into that deep, intense vulnerability. And there's so many layers of shame. And I think maybe that's it. It's the shame. There's shame about fucking everything as a woman, as a mother, as a human person. I mean, the very idea that I can say I do things that I like just because I like them, and because that's important. I mean, often I hear things like, oh, well, it's important for mums to do this so they can show up for their kids, or it's important to have space so they can do this. Fuck that. It's important for me to do shit that I like because I like doing it, because I'm a human woman and I get to do things with my life and have a life that I like. That feels revolutionary, right? Like, it's like, oh, so you don't care about your children? Oh, so you're more important than your children? And it's like, well, no, but like, we're all equally as important. Like, they're also not more important than me. Or are they? I don't know. That feels big to say. Like, maybe now I have to go back and go, are they more important? And it's not that I wouldn't. I think every mother I've met they love their child the most in the world, right? Like, it's just I don't believe anyone loves their kid more than a mother. So that's pretty standard. So maybe there is this part of me that would lay down my life for my children, right? But the idea that you must do that to be a good mother is so deeply ingrained with that. And it may not even just be your physical life, right? This big extreme example, but you should give up these little parts of you, just chip away at them to fit the mold of the mother that you should be for your children. And it's like, well, so like, where does that start and where does that end? Anyway, revolutionary. And I think when I think about and this is bullshit that I have to put it in these terms to feel okay with saying it. But when I think about my daughters, it's very easy for me to say, no. I want them to be full humans because they are just people. I don't want them to have this full humanity so they can also be great mothers for their children. Like, I want their lives to be full because they deserve to have full lives. So why can't we think that about ourselves? But that is really revolutionary, I think. And that's really like hard to feel and hard to say. And so, but where does that come to? Like, being that vulnerable, authentic, true self, it opens you up to criticism and actually sometimes real critique. Sometimes it's just our internal critic, which can be more powerful than external people even. But it opens you up to that, like, oh, that's not what a good mother would do, and you're not doing it right, and oh, how could she say that, and how could she be that? And we do a really good job of policing our own selves. What I have found sits over it's been fucking years, right, of like processing slowly getting to a point where I can be and show up authentically. I still feel vulnerable right now because my kids are interrupting me, right? So there's still that little critique in my brain going, well, I'll have to edit that bit out because I don't look so happy and I don't look so nice, and I wasn't like, sweetie, do you mind? And then she didn't listen to me, right? Like, she didn't actually do the thing that I said to do. And is someone judge me for not hanging up this call and just jumping in the pool with my kid? Because that's what a good mother would do. She wouldn't sit here filming something. She would attend to her child first. Like, all of these voices are in my head, and perfect timing. Oh, did you make a stamp?
I made it I made the leaf.
Oh, you made the leaf a stamp.
Oh, are you making something for Vilja?
Perfect.
I'm uncording these.
Okay.
Can you show me?
They're on top. They're in a silver bowl on the top of the drawers outside the kitchen near my office. Yeah, take. You're welcome. That was my
I
thought.
agree with you that this is perhaps the most revolutionary thing, because we're not the first generation to break the mold. That's not true, but we're in a different place, and I think we're gonna have to make some very real decisions as women. It feels like it's not recording. That's weird. We have to make some real decisions about what are we passing on to the children in terms. So everything that you just said in terms of, I need to do these things for me. Like, what do I need to do? And, can I love them and myself equally? Which sounds narcissistic. It creates trouble in my brain when I say it. Yeah. But to me, when you were saying it, because I know all the feelings you also feel when you're saying all the things you're saying, that the love is unwaveringly underneath, like always there. That's the connective tissue. The love for our children is something we can't articulate or remove or choose to love or not. What? So the love is the connective tissue, but within that, there has to be some level of equality there in terms of, for me at least, and for you apparently too, that there has to be equal amount of space for me too. In the ebb and flow realm and in the push and pull realm, like we're not talking equal time. It's not like that. And it's for me. But ultimately what is happening, I think, is that if we are able to do that authentically without rage, without anger and, resentment and all of those things, doing it because it is true and it's real and it's fair and it's a birthright, then only then I think our children has a chance to do that for real from a very early age. I've had to do this very late in my life. And I've really, if I could have one wish, it would be that they don't feel shame about embracing themselves and their needs. Because to me, if you're mentally stable, the love is unconditional. The love is in everything. Like that's the soup you're swimming in. And you just, I don't know if I'm making sense, but the love is easy. And we don't have to prove that by, doing all the things perfectly. That you can love equally in the mess, in the chaos, and in the irregularities of life. It doesn't have to look picture perfect. That's something else. And that part is so unhealthy. And if the kids experience the love and that showing off element, we're creating some very unstable mental health out there.
And I mean, it sounds like your girls are having a similar reaction to how you live as my girls have had. So years ago, when I wanted to work in, I was studying when they were younger. I used to work as a doula. I did on-call work for a while, and then I was studying to be a midwife, and during my studies I had to be on call for, it was a lot, 30 or 40 women, because whatever, basically 30 or so women over 3 years to go to their births and, appointments and on-call plus study plus, so it was many years of me being, out and about. And then after my youngest child was born, I got into a slightly different flow. So I'd be doing shifts and my life was a bit more predictable. But my passion is always, working with women directly in a continuity. Like that's always been how I've wanted to show up in this work from the very beginning. And I had an opportunity to try out a role in a group practice, which was more back to being on call again. But I felt that was a really big ask for my family, to be honest, because having done that for so long and then finally having a sense or some kind of semblance of order, even though it was busy, but there was some predictability. To go back to this unpredictability, I spoke to my husband about it, who was, very supportive, but also aware that we had a lot going on in our family and how was that going to work. And then I asked my daughters. I actually spoke to them about it. I'm trying to think how old the oldest ones were. Probably like 14 and 12, and then a little bit younger. So it was the older two that were more articulate. And I explained to them what I wanted to do and how it was a trial, because I think it was a temporary position of 5 or 6 weeks. So it was really just to see, can I do this? I had a 3-year-old at the time, maybe 3 to 13 was the ages of my kids. And my oldest daughter was just so amazing. The permission that she gave me was like, she goes, "Mummy, you do so much for us. Of course you should do this for you." And so,
Sweet.
yeah, but also that she knew that I wanted to do it because that's how I want to work. It wasn't, and we've had this conversation many times over the years, because, my kids do have times where like, why do you have to work? And why do you have to go? And, I talk to them about everybody has to do their job. We have to eat. That's life. We have to find a way to clothe ourselves and do those things. I'm one of the lucky people that I get to do something that I love to do, that I'm happy to get up in the middle of the night to do. And I want them to find that for themselves as well. And I think seeing me doing something that I feel really passionate about and that I get to do, I've no doubt that there is a part of them that's looking at me and reflecting, and what I'm reflecting to them is that they matter. And so I know we say, oh, we don't do this for them, but you know, we love them, right? Swim in that soup of love, and everything is, I don't know if we would continue doing it if our children were so grossly unhappy, because we do love them and we do want them to thrive, right? Like, that's just the reality of it. But seeing them reflect back that doing something that you love matters, and creating a living out of something that gives you pleasure is such a privilege. Not everybody gets that privilege. And I watch them looking at me and going, well, you know, I haven't found one who wants to be a midwife yet, but they do want to do something that they love as much as I love this.
Yeah.
And I want that for them. So if I've done nothing but show them that as a woman, you can pursue your dreams and do things that make you feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we are very blessed, but there's also something in us that have created this, because it's certainly not an easy path to take. And it's not, you know, there's a lot of people that would not want to do what we do. And it takes a bit of bravery to get to this point, I also think, because it's a very rocky path. But I think it is the way to show them that they can do this for themselves too. It's really validating them, and there can be a shared appreciation in a really humble and sweet way. I have noticed. Yesterday I came home from doing pre and postnatal visits, and I received a beautiful bouquet of flowers from a couple, and when I came home, you know, two of my kids were there, and they're like, "Hi, Mom," and they're like, "Wow, you got flowers?" And like, "Yeah, this is from, you know, a family I supported," and they were so thankful, and they gave me flowers. And that happens, you know, every now and then, which is so sweet. But I think they can really feel at a different level the connection and the love and the, you know, they don't sadly see my husband come home with flowers from, you know, a corporate connection he made with someone. Not to say that that's worse or anything, but more just, I do feel really happy that I get to show them that this is also a way you can show up in life, and how I show up for myself, and the ripple effect from that. I really believe in it, and I really feel like there is something in this. It wasn't premeditated, but it is really showing up for me in my life as like, there is something really beautiful in this. So it's, very precious. My battery is running very low. I just want to flag that.
I feel like it's been an hour and we've said a lot of different things, and this is what we do. So that's good.
We said a lot of things. Yes, exactly. Good.